He wants you hooked. How do you get hooked? How do you get hooked? I'm gonna tell you how some of you have gotten hooked, or how some of you stepped into a world of struggle against lustful thoughts. And the story I'm gonna tell you is a common story, and the details may not be exactly yours, but I'm guessing that if you have any kind of battle with lustful thoughts, that there's some version of this story that is actually your story, because most stories go something like this. Unfortunately, at some point, like me in the 5th grade, then again in the 7th grade, you had some type of traumatic sexual experience. Maybe like me, you were exposed to pornography. Tragically and heartbreakingly, many of you were molested at the hands of someone that you trusted or someone who abused you. Maybe for you, it was on a date and I liked the person and you were in the car and you were kissing and you're and then you went and it went whatever, and you ended up doing something that you shouldn't have been doing. You didn't plan to. You got hooked. And at that moment, you sustained an injury. It was a mental injury that distorted the purity of God's gift of lovemaking. It was an emotional injury because you weren't married and weren't ready to experience the purity of lovemaking that is available. And it was a spiritual injury that likely caused shame and separated you from God. And you are confused, because it's really confusing, because sometimes you can get caught up in porn or masturbation or fooling around or whatever it is, and you simultaneously can have this like dopamine rush, like you feel good and this is fun, and I like this. And there's enjoyment and there's pleasure and there's shame and there's guilt and there's self-disgust. And so if that's your story, like it was my story, you feel a little bit embarrassed and you don't want to talk about it. And so you either hide it, which is a problem, because sin grows best in the dark, or you justify it. And you say, well, at least I'm not, and I could be, and they are, and I'm not, and this isn't that bad, and so, God understands, and we're in love anyway, or it's not that big of a deal, or I'm just looking and I'm not doing whatever, or she's not meeting my needs, or he's not doing whatever, and you justify it. And so you either hide it or you justify it, or both. Then at some point, many of you, your story goes like this. You prayed. God, take the desire away. God, I don't want to do that again. God, I don't want to look again. God, I don't want to go there again. And you ask God to take the desire away, but the desire doesn't go away. And so at some point you promise, I'm gonna stop. This is my last time, and I'm not gonna do it again, or we're not gonna do it again. And for many of you, you actually do stop for a little while. And you have short periods of sexual sobriety until you stumble once. And when you stumble once, that often triggers a sexual binge, because, well, I just did it once, I might as well whatever, and then I'll try to start over again. And so you hate it, but you can't seem to overcome it. And then you hope one day, when I get married, all my problems are gonna be solved, because we can be together twice a day, every day, and 3 times on Sunday when we get married. That's another sermon, and that's not true, but many of you think that. And then you do get married, and it doesn't go away. And the reason it doesn't go away is because you don't just have a lust problem, you're dealing with a spiritual injury that hasn't healed. And somewhere in there, very likely, is some part of your story. You might say, what's the big deal? Like, why get upset about like a little bit of porn, not hurting anybody? I could be doing so much worse. What's a little bit of lust? What's the big deal? And what I want to say is that whenever your lusts are full grown, James said, it gives way to death. And James isn't the only one who issued these stern warnings. In fact, Solomon talked to his sons in the book of Proverbs, and he said this in Proverbs chapter 5, verses 3-5. Listen to the severity of these metaphors. He said, for the lips of an immoral woman, they're sweet as honey, sweet, and smoother than oil, smooth, baby, smooth. But in the end, she is as bitter as poison and is dangerous as a double-edged sword. Where does she lead you? Where does sexual sin lead you? Her feet go down to death. Her steps lead straight to the grave. These are strong metaphors, right?